and controversies at home and abroad. We will be joined in a moment by White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who himself is at the center of an ongoing story. Before we get to the New York Post columnist about Steve Bannon, his chief strategist, and saying, I like Steve, but, if I heard that as press secretary, I think, that's what comes after but.
Well, I'll be very clear. I think he values Steve's commitment to the team and helping to advance his agenda. But I think he also wants to make sure that everybody understands, when you look back at in the 1980s and 1990s, the policies that this president is now espousing and championing here in terms of trade policies, economic policies, are policies that he's held for, in some cases 2, 3, 4 decades. And then he wants to make sure that he's very clear that he won this election because of the policies that he's been laying out for decades and the commitment that he's had to the American worker, to growing our economy and keeping our country safe. And I think that the line had been blurred a little bit. He wanted to make it very clear, but at the same time express confidence in the team that's here and the talent that he has assembled.
Sean, yesterday you made an error in the briefing when talking about atrocities committed by the Syrian President Assad when you compared it to Hitler, and you immediately corrected that mistake. And I thought your apology was quite sincere and genuine. Now, it was quite interesting to me that all 3 networks last night led the news with that mistake and that apology rather than the other news. But okay, setting that aside, when did you know, at what point in the briefing yesterday did you know that you had something that you had to fix?
There's two pieces of it, I guess, and I'm not focused so much on that, Dana, as you know. I mean, I think I recognize that I made a mistake, but I think it's twofold. One is obviously there's a personal factor here. There's a lot of people that took offense to that. I wanted to make sure that those people understood that that was clearly not my intent. But more importantly, or not more importantly, but equally, I think that to your point, we've been having a great week here advancing the president's agenda. He's done a phenomenal job of reasserting our place in the world and making sure that we help millions of people who need help as we continue to combat ISIS, help the people in Syria. And it was just unfortunate that my mistake helped create a distraction from the president's, the great work that he's doing for this country, and frankly throughout the world. So I knew that it needed to be fixed, and I sincerely not just regret that what I did to other people about my own mistake, but also obviously it's a mistake and you let down the president who you serve, because my job is to help do what I can to advance this thing, not get in the way of it. Unfortunately, yesterday I did just that.
But Sean, were you a little harder on yourself than even the president was? I mean, did you have a chance to talk to him?
I did. He is one of the most gracious bosses and leaders that you could imagine. But you're right. You are hard on yourself when you realize, and you know this better than anybody, Dana, this is an awesome responsibility and a great privilege and honor to have this position. And I think when you are guilty of making a mistake, you recognize that you're, at least for me, a little bit hard on myself, because I realized that I was a distraction from the great work that this president has and continues to do on behalf of this country. And when you overshadow his accomplishments and the commitments that he's making to put people back to work, to reform healthcare, on education, and keeping this country safe in so many ways, you have to reflect and just, you know that you are a distraction to his great work and the privilege and honor that he's given me. So it's disappointing to myself, and I hope people will not only.
I do think you're a little harder on yourself than you need to be, but especially because I immediately identified it. I do think that just looking back for me, I think one of the things I most learned in that job, or the most important lessons, were about dignity and graciousness, empathy, and certainly humility. There's no job that will humble you like the White House press secretary's job. Is there anything else that you've learned so far? You're about 83 days into the administration. Does anything surprise you?
No, I think you gave me some very sage advice during this process, and I think it really is. I think you've got to go in every day and be prepared as you can be. You got a lot of homework to do every day. You're trying to represent this government, the American people, the president, making sure that you understand the key issues at hand, and frankly, some of the issues that haven't bubbled up to the top, but you're as prepared as possible. And that you're as focused as possible. And obviously, you see sometimes what happens when you're not. But it is an awesome responsibility. It takes a lot of hard work every day, and you do your best to represent this president, this White House, this administration, and this country. And
it does feel, in some ways, the press is just slightly ahead of where the policy making is. So that because events have moved so quickly, especially on the foreign policy front, sort of swamping other things, then you've got the continued Russia investigation and all the other unknowns that you have out there.
Well, that's right. But I think, again, if you actually stop and look at what the president's been able to accomplish over the last 10 days, you know, 3 world leaders come in last week, where we're making tremendous progress, and it's amazing how many of these world leaders the president meets with. And they talk about rebuilding a relationship that the U.S. has lacked for the last 8 years, and they're so excited to reestablish that, work with this president to advance shared goals, whether it's economic or national security ones. And the president had a tremendous week last week, and then obviously he took very decisive, justified, proportional response with Syria that just really got huge praise from around the world. So he continues to make great traction. I think what we did today continues to show that with this alliance with NATO.
All right, Sean. Get home to Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Thank